Some people call me the space cowboy. Yeah. Some call me the gangster of love. Some people call me Maurice, 'cause I speak of the pompatus of love.
What's going on out there, fellow Tightwads, fellow California Golden Bears fans? Been a minute. Been a very long minute, in fact. 5 unplanned months off since the last broadcast we did back on, what was it, February the 16th? Yeah, been a hot while. A lot of stuff that has gone on between then and now. Spring semester's already been over for over a month, but figured you had to make sure to get one last regular spring semester show out of the way, which is this one right here, coming at you all right here, right now. And, of course, also still get the spring semester, full spring semester and review show out of the way, which will be coming at you on Friday, July the 31st. That's, of course, in a couple of little over a day. But that's then. This is now. Well, it's long overdue and all the good old stuff. Let's go ahead and get show number 57 of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill finally underway after a 5-month unplanned hiatus. Again, hope everybody's doing great out there. Wherever you are tuning in from and whenever you are tuning in from. This, of course, is the 30th and current sitting governor of Tightwad Hill, Keith Salmonen, coming at you from the good old Dub 6 Studios located in the Diamond District in Oakland, California. Again, apologies that it's been so long since the last time we came at you here on TBR. A lot of personal stuff going on, just, things going on with me. Christy still having on and off health issues, other things going on, my involvement with Forever Oakland, just, life got in the way. Things happen, but glad to be back. Glad to get 2 more shows out of the way before we take a brief 28-day abbreviated summer hibernation break and then kick things off again with the fall semester editions of the show with back-to-back shows at the end of August. On the 29th and the 30th with the Cal football preview show, and of course the first of the fall semester shows, which of course is show number 58. Before I forget about things, obviously, I technically will not be alone for this edition of the show, though it's been a hot minute. Through, of course, the advantages and privileges of audio recordings from audio we recorded back in May, when we thought one of the many times the show was going to be rescheduled was going to take place. Through audio recordings, I will be joined by the 29th and Governor Emeritus of Tightwad Hill, Tad Dillinger III, who, of course, co-founded this show with me. Also will be joined as well through those same audio recordings by Donnie Knucklehead Hudson, who will be involved in some of the little tidbits of news that will be going down and coming your way. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and get on into things here on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Got a whole lot to talk about on this edition of the show, obviously, since it's been several months since we've done anything on here. A couple things, obviously, we wanted to make sure to touch bases on before we get into some Cal football off-season news, and, of course, take a look back at what the spring semester programs did from February the 17th through the end of the spring semester, which basically wrapped up around June 11th, 12-ish time frame. Since the last time we came at you, unfortunately, 2 Cal football legends passing away in the several months that we were last at you. Just making sure I got everything loaded on here before I get into that. The first one of those, of course, was Paul Jones, who was a legendary fullback for the California Golden Bears football program, playing with Cal from 1975 to 1979. Known for his powerful smash-mouth running style, he stands as one of the most durable and productive backs in Cal football's history. Sadly, he passed away on May 8th. At the age of 69. The other Cal legend who also unfortunately has passed away since the last time we came out here on the show. Another member of the football program was, of course, none other than Craig Morton. Craig, of course, was a legendary Hall of Fame quarterback for the California Golden Bears from 1962 to 1964 before embarking on an 18-year NFL career. Universally, he's recognized as one of the greatest players in Cal football history. He unfortunately passed away on May the 9th. At the age of 83. So before we get on further in things, ladies and gentlemen, please join us in a moment of silence for Paul Jones and Craig Morton. Thank you, fellow Tightwads, fellow California Golden Bears, and joining us in recognizing these late Cal football legends who we unfortunately lost a little over 2 months ago. On that note, two other things to touch bases on as well before we get into the football talk and the spring semester sports recap portions of tonight's show. One of the other little tidbits of news from the Cal athletic side that came out, of course, that I feel is of importance to discuss here on this edition of the show is that back on May the 22nd, Cal announced the 9 Golden Bears who will be elected into the upcoming 2026 edition of the Cal Athletic Hall of Fame. So the class of 2026 has been announced, and the class of 2026 will feature J.J. Arrington, who played for the football program from 2003 to 2004. He holds the program's all-time single-season rushing record with 2,018 yards, which he set back in 2004. Andre Carter, who also was with the football program, he played on the team from 1997 to 2000. Unanimous All-American, who was the number 7 pick in the 2001 NFL Draft. Missy Franklin, who played on the women's swimming and diving program from 2013 to 15. Olympic hero who won 4 NCAA individual championships and helped the Bears capture the 2015 NCAA team title. Erica Fry, who was part of the rugby program from 2005 to 2010. He was a 4-time All-American and helped Cal capture 4 national championships. Irv Hunt, ERV, who was a track and field coach from 1973 to 2002, produced 5 NCAA champions, 50 conference champions, and 90 All-Americans over a 30-year career. Kara Kohler, who was part of the women's rowing program from 2010 to 2013, was a 4-time All-American and appeared in 3 Olympic Games. Atlee Manhorn, part of the track and field program from 1986 to 1990, was a 2-time All-American who set multiple program records and appeared in 3 Olympics. Alex Morgan, who was part of the women's soccer program from 2007 to 2010, was an All-American who went on to win 2 World Cup titles and an Olympic gold medal with Team USA. And Tony Renda, who played for the baseball program from 2010 to 2012. He was a Pac-10 Player of the Year and led Cal to the 2011 College World Series. The class of 2026 will be formally introduced during the next Cal Athletic Hall of Fame weekend, which as of now is scheduled for the fall of 2027. The classes of 2026 and 2027 will be enshrined together. The Cal Athletic Hall of Fame now has 364 individuals and 7 rowing champions. The school's Hall of Fame, which is located on the west side of California Memorial Stadium, is open to all ticket holders after each home game. So definitely be sure to check that out at some point. And finally, before we get into the normal talking of Cal football offseason news and, of course, what the other spring programs did, a little bit of things to be looking forward to as far as Tightwad Hill goes. Yes, we are obviously a little over 2+ years out from when the next election for governor of Tightwad Hill will be taking place, but the field is beginning to slowly take shape, and one benefactor that will be helping out probably all 3 of the individuals that have so far thrown their hat into the ring at this point in time is yours truly will not be a factor in the next election, which of course is scheduled to take place at the final home game of the 2028 season. The election process was an idea that was conjured up by both myself and Tad Dillinger III. Kind of came up with it roughly at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. Ran the idea, of course, by the full Tightwad cabinet, which, of course, finalized and endorsed using that as the protocol for selecting governors going forward at the end of the 2015 season. We, of course, implemented it for the first time in 2016, where I went on to beat Burt Brown in the last 3 elections that have taken place. Yes, I announced shortly after I got reelected in 2014 that I was not going to be seeking a 5th term as the governor of Tightwad Hill. I'll still be around. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere just because I'm not going to be the governor anymore at the end of 2028. I will be a governor emeritus, which means still being part of the Tightwad cabinet to help out with overseeing things, advising things, putting stuff together with game day operations and all that stuff, and running this show, obviously, as well. And, I'm also the Hill's unofficial historian. I bet have been since, the early years of me going up there once I become settled in and became part of the group. So yeah, I will not be a factor. I will not be running. It'll have been 16 years by the time I'm done being the governor. Enjoyed it, hell of a ride, but I definitely feel like it's time to pass on the title to the next individual to carry it on for 4 years, however many years they want to do. They only want to do 1 term. That's on them. If they want to try to make a run at my 16 years, that's on them to do as well, because I'll have been the longest serving governor by the time I get out. The 3 individuals that have so far thrown their hats into the ring, per se, to be part of the be part of the election when it goes down in 2028. Again, 3 individuals so far. First one, of course, and probably most likely considered to be the heavy favored individual to potentially be crowned as the next governor of Tightwad Hill, and potentially be the first ever governess of Tightwad Hill that we ever had, would of course be my current and 4th overall lieutenant governor of Tightwad Hill, my sister from another Mr. Jenny Ortega. She began attending Cal football games in 2015. Obviously has met the minimum requirement at this point in time, which is at least 10 years up on Tightwad Hill to become a candidate to run for the governor position. Has already been my lieutenant governor since the end of January once Tito stepped by. She's already set a record as the first female in the leadership, the unofficial, group of leadership that we have up there, which includes the governor, lieutenant governor, and the cabinet as well. And again, would be seeking the opportunity to become the first governess, first female governor that Tightwad Hill has ever had in its 100-plus year history. Another likely person that will be in the ring as well, hasn't announced things officially, but it's a highly expected that he will be throwing his hat into the ring once again. I'm pretty sure we'll know for sure on that once the football season kicks off. I'm pretty sure that we are all 99.99.99.9% confident that my good friend and arch nemesis rival in the past elections, when I was running for re-election, Burt Brown. No reason to not suspect that Burt will be running again. Again, Burt, having lost the last 3 elections to me since we introduced this process in 2016, does have the factor playing for him that he doesn't have to worry about facing me this go-around, with me not continuing on and transition into a governor emeritus role in 2018. But again, facing off against the highly favored top pick as right now in Jenny Ortega, who, by the way, will be getting my endorsement to be the next governor at some point during the 2026 Cal football season, so stay tuned with that. So Jenny in the mix. Burt Brown obviously will be most likely in the mix as well. We'll hear something most likely officially on that at some point during the 2016 season as well. Earlier today, and by today, obviously, earlier in the day here of the July the 29th, hours before I'm recording this, Donnie Knucklehead Hudson, yes, good old Donnie, who's a part of this show, officially decided after months of speculation that he will also be throwing his hat into the ring as well. So we will, as of right now, have a 3-person race potentially at this point in time for the 2028 election. Donnie, of course, has been sitting up there since the mid-2000 time frames, longtime member of things up there, part of the Tightwad cabinet, has been part of this show since we started doing it back in 2020. He would be the oldest governor, should he end up getting elected in 2028, being in his mid-60s already at this point in time himself. But definitely going to be really interesting, and obviously it'll be, interesting as well to see if anybody else decides to jump in and challenge these three individuals as well. So kind of a too early look at what could be playing out in 2028. But as of right now, these are the three folks to look forward to that will be part of the mix in that election for your next governor of Tightwad Hill, 31st governor of Tightwad Hill, because again, yours truly will not be seeking a fifth term. Will it be Burt Brown? Will it be a historic record set with Donnie Knucklehead Hudson being declared the oldest governor ever at 31? And probably people out there are wondering, is this you who going to be running under the moniker of the Donnie Meat Party? Come on, y'all. You knew we were going to throw a piece of Donnie Meat joke into this thing in some way or another. Or will Jenny add on to an already historic setup and run by not only becoming the first female in leadership up on the Hill, but also becoming the first ever governess of Tightwad Hill 2+ years ago. And again, have to wait and see if anybody else mixes it in. But this will also obviously be the first time we have more than two people running in this election. This is the last 3 times we did it. It's only been myself and Bert going into it. So definitely keep your eyes and ears on that. And that's it as far as the little bit of non-sports related stuff I wanted to get out there. And, of course, obviously made sure that we got our chance to pay our respects to the late Paul Jones and the late Craig Morton. And speaking of those late, great Cal legends, definitely be sure to keep your ears open when we get into the football segment here in a little bit, because good old Donnie Knucklehead happens to have a moment that's connected to one of those late, great Cal individuals, and you'll obviously be getting to hear that here in a wee little bit as we finally get into the meat and potatoes, I guess you can say, of what we normally do here on the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. And that's obviously, besides recapping the latest action with Cal athletic sports programs, regardless if it's the spring or the fall semester. Obviously, for the purpose of this show, it's wrapping up things for the spring semester from February the 17th into roughly about June 11th, 12th-ish time frame. Before we get into that, as I apparently inadvertently have another one of the Hall of Fame logos in there somehow miraculously. Before we get into all the other Cal athletic talk, there is some good, juicy top tidbits of Cal football offseason news. Obviously, there's been a whole lot of stuff that's been going on and off, and there's also been some donation-related stuff tied to the program, and I want to say I think the athletic department overall, that I will go ahead and save to lead off things with the spring semester season in review show on Friday, July the 31st. Already, I would share it now since the news dropped earlier today, but just there's already so much to talk about and go through over the course of this broadcast that I just don't want to make your head blow with anything else at this point in time. So on that note, let's go ahead and get into the Cal football offseason talk for this edition of the show. And to begin things with this portion of the broadcast, we will actually be rewinding the clock back to, I want to say, if I remember correctly, May the 16th, for when the upcoming audio that's about to be coming y'all's ways here on the show was recorded. So apologies in advance if when you're hearing the audio, it happens to mention things about the show being the next day. It's obviously not the case at the time when this broadcast got rescheduled multiple times. We thought at that time when we recorded this audio that we would be doing the show that Sunday after things with Cal baseball wrapped up, but that ended up not happening, so disregard all that stuff. On that note, let's go ahead and get things going on this Cal football off-season news segment by hitting back up things with me and the rest of the Bear Raid cast in the past. Thank you, as always, to Keith in the present. This, of course, is Keith in the past, coming at you the day before the recording of this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Joined, of course, by the other two individuals that make up the original cast of this show. We're getting ready, of course, to watch the third and final game of a three-game series between your California Golden Bears baseball program and the Stanford Cardinal. We'll touch bases more on that during the second segment of tonight's broadcast when we get into the Cal baseball talk during the second segment of the show. Joining me, of course, this will be the last time you'll be hearing from these individuals, by the way, until we do our Cal football preview show, which we'll give a little more info about here later on at the near the end of our Cal football talk. But last time of the spring semester, we'll be hearing from my two co-hosts. Joining me, of course, the individual that was the governor of the Tightwad Hill before I came into the picture, good old Tad Dillinger III. Taddy, what is going on, my man?
It's all good. Getting ready to hit the fucking go up into New York.
Also joining us as well as the man that we always refer to as the knucklehead of Tightwad, Donnie Hudson. Don, my man, what's going on?
Oh, little baseball here at Stu Gordon Stadium. Cal Bears in the rubber game will kick ass today. Baseball at Berkeley in May.
Again, we'll have more Cal baseball talk a little later on in the show, as, of course, this is the Cal football talk on this edition of the show. And, yeah, cat it off as I'm spilling my beer in the middle of recording this nonsense here in what we've dubbed the Tightwad Grove next to Stu Gordon Stadium. Been a couple months since the last time we did a show, but nonetheless, gonna talk about 5 key points that we feel here are stuff that should be talked about in regards to Cal football. First thing we're going to discuss here, obviously, I already touched bases on it a little bit earlier in the show. We're going to go ahead and get Tad and Donnie's takes on it as well, and that's, of course, recently the passing of Paul Jones and Craig Morton. Paul Jones passed away on May 8th, and Paul Jones passed away on May 8th. Craig Morton passed away on May the 9th. Two Cal legends that were part of the football program. Morton, of course, had a tremendous career in the NFL, all stuff, of course, I touched bases on earlier in the show. Now to go ahead and hear my co-host's point of view on us losing two Cal legends.
Yeah, it's sad that we lost these two legends of Peace View of them. Craig Morton was a quarterback doing the Levy and Wash era, which I was barely alive at the time, but he went on and played for the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, he never won a Super Bowl, but he played for the Dallas Cowboys in Super Bowl V, and then he played in Super Bowl 12 for the Denver Broncos against the Dallas Cowboys. Rest in peace.
Yeah, I got to meet Craig Morton, When I was a kid, I came out to a Cal football game on the school bus from Pleasant Hill Recreation. I must have been in about 6th grade with my brother Brett. And when Craig Morton was the starting quarterback, so didn't really know anything about it. It was my first Cal game. Then later years in the 90s, he owned a series of restaurants around San Francisco. And he was a silent partner at a restaurant that I was a waiter at in North Beach. So I got to know him as a person. He's a great guy. R.I.P. Craig.
R.I.P. once again to these two great individuals. Tad and Donnie, of course, not really familiar with Paul, unfortunately, is an individual that played way before any of our time. But again, rest in peace to these two great California Golden Bears legends. Topic number 2 that we're going to touch bases on in this Cal football talk here on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid. Yeah, it's been, a month plus since it happened, but hey, again, we haven't done a show since February the 15th, right? So, of course, we're going to touch bases on the spring game, which happened back on April the 18th, I believe the date was, if I remember correctly, April the 18th, up at California Memorial Stadium. Yellow squad defeating the blue squad by a final score of 21-7, though wasn't really paying much attention to individual stats. My concern was seeing a little bit of a preview of what we could potentially see with the program when things start back up in September. The one thing that for me personally stood out is I like the fact that it was an actual exhibition practice game versus where the last couple of years it had been, more of a what they literally were calling it, which was the spring showcase, where they were, basically showcasing all the different drills and crap that they do during the freaking spring training campaign and whatnot. So it was nice to actually have an actual game to watch for the spring game again. And I also think it was kind of cool that they let a little kid score a touchdown at the end to close out things on the spring game. So yeah,
that was great.
Nice little day up there. You all hearing my thoughts? Here are my co-host thoughts on what went down with the 2026 edition of the Cal Football Spring Game.
Hey, it looks like, we have a pretty good aggressive offense. Defense looks pretty good. Yeah, we should go 10-2 or 9-3 this year.
Well, I had a great time at the spring game. I sat up there in the shade in the Koofy seats, the ones with big cushions. I felt like a big shot. Tosh Lupoy's bringing it this year. Taddy's going 10-2. I'll just go off the top and say we're only losing one game, and we might have to lose that one. We're going to win the game that we're going to lose. You say that's crazy? Just wait and see Cal football.
Maybe jumping out a little early there with our predictions on what the program would do, But no doubt, definitely feeling like that, and maybe something that we should be saving for our Cal football season preview show, which, by the way, will be happening on August the 29th. We'll give you start times and additional info for that later on in the coming months. So there's a little surprise to Cal football talk info for you. Topic number 3, of course, Ron Rivera being inducted into the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame. Since the last time we came at you, happening not too long after the spring game went down. Of course, Ron, Cal alumni, part of the football program, played in the NFL, had a decent coaching career in the NFL. Individual that many of us for years actually wanted to come and coach the Cal football program at various points after Tedford left. Kind of wish we would have had him instead of Sonny Dykes, or maybe instead of Wilcox as well. But ultimately, finally getting into the picture as the general manager of the football program and entering his second year as the GM here at Cal football. Part of a trident, I like to say, of Cal alumni and him. Loins is the chancellor, and of course Lepoy is the coach, having alumni in some of the key leadership positions that we hope will make this football program turn around. Gentlemen, your thoughts on Ron Rivera entering the Hispanic Football Hall of Fame?
It's good. We have someone who's going to enter the Hall of Fame, Hispanic Hall of Fame. He's quite an individual. He was pro. He was all pro with Chicago Bears, and quite an All-American at Cal. So it's a good thing.
Something just dawned on me. I want to say that the university brought in Rivera, knowing that Rivera would go after Lupoy, and everything would be peaches and cream in Berkeley.
Nice little quick and hit point there from Donnie Knucklehead. Topic number 4, of course, as we all know, JKS, or Saga as we like to call him, up on Tightwad Hill, will be back, of course, as the starting quarterback after a solid true freshman campaign last season. News that, of course, came out recently. I mean, the reality is I'm not shocked at this at all. I don't know about my co-hosts or their thoughts on the matter, but learning, of course, after the fact that during the offseason, multiple schools, none of them have been named yet at this point at this time since we are doing this recording, but multiple schools calling up Saga's parents trying to basically get him to leave Cal and go play elsewhere. Years past, obviously, we probably would have had tampering issues up the ass thrown at schools. NIL era, though, obviously a little bit different. Saga said he had no intent of going anywhere, but obviously the school still upped their NIL payment to him to keep him here for the next year. So, yeah, definitely interesting. Not shocked at it at all. Just the reality is that's the thing you got to deal with when it comes to some of these players in the NIL era. Tad and Donnie, your thoughts on what would have been considering tampering back in the day with Saga?
It was ridiculous because Tosh Lupoy went out to one of the first things he did when he became the Cal coach is he went out to Hawaii and talked with Sagan and his parents and visited with them and they locked him down. So it's like I find it ridiculous. I'm glad they upped the payment.
Ditto that. I wasn't going to say ridiculous, but I think Tad's right. Everyone heard about Lupoy flying out without his family on his own, I understand. He bought his own plane ticket just to go out and meet the folks out in Waikiki there. Roll on Bears. Saga's got it. He wanted to stay in California, and we have a bunch of other Hawaiians on the football team as well. I can't name them now. Give me halfway through the season, I'll be able to tell you all the Hawaiians on the team.
The fifth and final topic that we'll be discussing here on the football talk of this edition of the show, 3 dates being locked in for sure that were questionable about potentially being changed early in the season for the upcoming 2026 season for Cal football. Friday Night Lights will be going down against Clemson on September the 25th here in Berkeley at California Memorial Stadium. Funny thing was, I don't remember seeing anything about that game originally being potentially flexed, but I guess maybe I missed that and it did. But that game is locked in for a Friday night contest in Berkeley against Clemson on September the 25th. October the 24th against SMU, that's a Saturday, and October the 31st against North Carolina State. That's Halloween, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Those are both road games. Those are both locked in for Saturdays. That means we're going to have Halloween at the Kingfish. That's going to be an interesting night, as we'll be at the Kingfish for both of those contests. Again, September the 25th, a Friday night locked in against Clemson. October the 24th, a Saturday locked in on the road against SMU. And, of course, a road game on Halloween against North Carolina State. SMU, North Carolina games, or North Carolina State games, excuse me. Of course, you'll find us at the Kingfish, and you already know where to find us for the Clemson game on the 25th. Gentlemen, your thoughts on having 3 games that we apparently were still waiting to find out lock-in times have now been locked in for the season.
I think it'll be enjoyable games. People ought to come out for the Kingfish parties, or come up to Tightwad Hill. It's gonna be a party. It's gonna be a blast.
Blast is right. I already see the Kingfish overflowing. I can see people out on the sidewalk. Cal Bears about, 8-0. We'll be in the headlines. We'll be in the Chronicle. People are going to jump on board. Come on, Cal Bears, jump on board.
I definitely, for one, look forward to seeing Donnie in his Winnie the Pooh costume at that Halloween game at the Kingfish on October the 31st. On that note, me and the gentlemen will be back with you a little later in tonight's broadcast for the Cal Baseball Talk on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid. But I got a lot of stuff, of course, to discuss between now and then. So on that note, let's go ahead and head back to Dub 6 Studios and yours truly in the present.
Thank you, current governor, past governor, and potential future governor, maybe. In the past, myself, Taddy, and Donnie coming at you, of course, with audio that was recorded back on May the 16th. So, again, obviously, any references to things happening the next day on that audio, and when we join back up with myself and the gang in the past again during the baseball segment later here in tonight's show. It didn't happen yesterday. Obviously, recorded back in May and just now getting around to doing the show after multiple times of rescheduling it since the end of February and now. And also, there's still a couple other Cal football tidbits to touch on as well that have happened since we recorded that, all that stuff right there with me and the guys that I need to make sure gets put out on the airwaves if you somehow have missed out on it. First of those couple other bits that have been added on before we get on into finally recapping the Cal Spring programs. We're already over a half hour in. We're not even out of the football talk yet. That's nothing new here on the Bear Raid. Start times for the first 5 games of the 2026 Cal football season have been announced. That was announced back on May the 25th. Home opener against UCLA at California Memorial Stadium will be a 7:30 p.m. kickoff time. Meetup time, of course, for those of us up on Tightwad Hill will begin roughly about 11 a.m. Pacific Standard, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Game 2, which, of course, is on the road. I believe that's against Syracuse. That'll be a 12:30 kickoff start, which means we'll be meeting up at the Kingfish for that one at a little bit before 12. You have Wagner coming in. Let's see here. That's September 5th for UCLA. Looks like, try to look here and see what it looks like on my end. I think that's the, first home game against UCLA, second game against Syracuse. Wagner will be coming to Berkeley for 12:30 start for Game 3. That means we'll be probably get up to Tightwad Hill roughly about 8, 9 o'clock-ish in the morning. 7:30 kickoff time for Game 4, which will be in Berkeley as well. Then, of course, Game 5 will be on the road. That'll be a 12:30 p.m. start right there. Also, in regards to the home games, regardless of the games that have times dictated for them or not, all the games, by the way, outside of the first 5, excuse me, games of the season, their start times will not be announced until roughly about 6 to 12 days out from the day of the game. The home games, though, have all their game themes already announced and scheduled heading into the 2026 season. Those game themes, of course, September the 5th versus UCLA will be the home opener. The gates to California Memorial Stadium will be open for the new football season, inviting fans to help usher in the new era of Cal football as Lee Poi takes a sideline as Cal's head coach for the first time, and a long-standing rivalry with former conference foe UCLA is renewed. September the 19th versus Wagner, that will be rooted in the Bay Day. September the 25th versus Clemson, which is will of course be a 7:30 p.m. start. That's one of the games that already has a start time announced for it. Will be the Gold Out game, so make sure to remember to wear gold to Memorial Stadium and Tightwad Hill on September the 25th. October 10th versus Virginia Tech, that will be the annual homecoming game, and it'll actually be a dual event day, by the way, on Tightwad. You'll have the football game going on, homecoming going on. We're just waiting to find out what time the football game will be starting. From 12 to 4 that same day, you'll have Fleet Week from Tightwad Hill going on. Yes, you can see the air show from up on Tightwad Hill. A little bit of a unique perspective than what most are probably accustomed to if you normally go down to the San Francisco waterfront. This is an angle, of course, where you're looking from Berkeley down onto the bay, so you get to see the air show box. You get to see them when they're going behind the crowd and setting up the do stuff. Just general view up there. So you'll have the game on the 25th with Clemson going on with the homecoming and the SF Fleet Week at Tightwad Hill as well. Other game themes, give me a second here for this to reload. October the 17th versus Wake Forest will be Grateful Bears, so that's obviously going to be a Grateful Dead theme night. November 21st versus hated rival Stanford, that's of course the 129th edition of the big game, and the finale on November the 28th versus Pittsburgh will be the Hometown Heroes night. They'll be going on up there. Let's see, what else do we have going on as well? Didn't mean to close out the window on my end. 2 future game dates were also announced as well since the last time we came at you. And these will be games that, of course, will be going down for the Cal football program, not this year, but next year. Looking like it will be in the early goings of things here. I'm just trying to make sure I get this info pulled up. So apologies, it's taking me a little while here. Sacramento State and Old Dominion being added as future opponent matchups for the 2027 season. Cal currently is scheduled to face the Hornets in a Week 0 matchup. I almost dropped my phone. Week 0 matchup between Cal and Sac State that would go down on August the 28th. And that would, of course, be in Berkeley at California Memorial Stadium. They would also be facing the Monarchs from Old Dominion at Memorial Stadium on September the 11th. So those are obviously, games that would be taking place early in the season. Week 0 would be obviously the first game of the year. Have to wait and see if there's a normal, really regular Week 1 matchup. And then the Old Dominion matchup looking like it will be, my guess, the third game of the year, depending if they have anything scheduled for that Week 1 time frame. So Sacramento State, Old Dominion are 2 programs we can look forward to seeing Cal football taking on in 2027. And finally, the last big tidbit, but certainly not least tidbit that I wanted to make sure to get out of the way here for Cal football off-season talk is GM Ron Rivera, who we touched bases on in that recording that I played for you all a little while ago with myself, Tad, and Donnie, being extended as the general manager of Cal football through at least the 2028 season. The reason, if you're wondering why I'm kind of chuckling at the moment, is because there was an individual on one of our social media pages. I forgot if it was our Facebook page or our Twitter page. Probably most likely it was our Twitter page that when that post went out saying that they needed to sign Ron Rivera through, I think it was 3028 instead. And that, of course, led me to bust out the meme of Deadpool saying to Wolverine in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, "Till you're 90." That, great to have him locked up for a couple more years, but definitely impossible, man. They need to have Ron around for as long as they possibly can, and especially, again, the trident that I referred to of him, Loins, who's the chancellor, and, of course, Leapoy, the head coach, man. It's building up to be a great combo, and I look forward to seeing how that combo ultimately ends up playing out. And, hey, going to be definitely interesting as well to see what unfolds as we get closer and closer to the 2026 Cal football season. Won't be having any more Cal football-related talk on the next show, and that's, of course, even if something ends up breaking between the time I wrap up recording this and before I record things for the spring semester in review show on Friday, July the 31st. Anything that goes down, that, of course, will be touched on and discussed when myself and the guys do the Cal football season preview show for the 2026 season. We are going to be doing that, by the way, in case y'all have forgotten or missed out. That will be taking place on August the 29th, and, of course, will be airing on the good old YouTube channel here. Myself, of course, obviously will be there. Tad and Donnie are scheduled to show up. Taddy, of course, will be just fresh off of coming back from that trip to New York. I want to say, I think he literally just been back for a day or two when he comes to the studio. So Taddy should be here. Donnie expected to be here. Might have Eric Mad Dog Manson and the Boss Man, who, of course, was my longtime co-host when I used to do A's Fan Radio, jumping in for that show as well. Or, of course, we'll be taking a look at the 2026 schedule for Cal football, and as I just mentioned, touching bases on any Cal football-related news that breaks between once we wrap up things here with the spring semester shows and when we do that season preview show on August the 29th, 8th. I always forget what it is. I'm pretty sure it's the 29th, but in case if I get that wrong, I'll make sure to give the correct date when we do the spring semester in review show. And that wraps up the Cal football talk. Doesn't wrap up the Cal athletics talk. And 40-plus minutes in, we'll be doing one more piece of Cal athletic talk before we finally take our first break here on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid, as we go ahead and take a look at what Cal Rugby ended up doing to close out things for their spring semester schedule. Cal Rugby, historically one of the most dominant programs at the University of California, especially within the last 30, 40 years with the program's coaching and all that has been going on. We picked back up, of course, with things, and again, this is recapping things from the time frame of February the 17th through the end of the spring semester on June the 11th, 12-ish time frame for all the athletic programs. For Cal Rugby, we pick back up on the action with recaps on February the 21st, where, of course, they hosted BYU at Woodard Rugby Field in Berkeley, California. Myself and Taddy, of course, were on tap and there in person to witness yet another victory for the rugby program, as Cal Rugby, of course, would be victorious over BYU in that February the 21st contest by a final score of 64-21. March 7th, they would stay in Berkeley as they would host Navy for what, of course, would be the final regular season match for the program in the spring. Back and forth battle between these long contested rivals who were normally and annually ranked at the top of the college rugby programs for the division they play in. Cal ultimately able to beat out Navy in that contest on March the 7th by a final score of 52-46. They would close out the season with two matches on the road. The first of those two road matches being on March 14th at West Point, where they easily defeated Army by a final score of 70-18. They would end the season on March the 28th, technically back in the Bay Area, just not at home. They would be at out in Moraga, taking on St. Mary's to close out the regular season portion of the schedule, and they took down the Gales by a final score of 66-35. Playoff action going down after that, as of course the 2026 D1 National Collegiate Championships got underway for Cal, starting on April the 11th, where they would face off against San Diego at Winter Rugby Field. Myself and Taddy, of course, there for all of the home playoff matches that were played for the Cal Rugby program. So, of course, we got to see them take down San Diego by a final score of 88-5. We were also there at Winter Rugby Field on April the 18th, when for the second time this year they would face off against BYU, and, of course, would once again defeat BYU, this time taking them down by a final score of 96-12. St. Mary's, who, of course, they faced off against to end the regular season, would face off against Cal for a second time, as well as this would determine who would go on to the national championship game, April the 25th at Winter Rugby Field. Cal, of course, taking down St. Mary's by a final score of 59-19, and that, of course, sets the stage for the championship matchup in Indianapolis, Indiana, which, of course, played out on May the 2nd at Kutz Stadium. They, of course, faced off against Navy for the second time, so their last three matches were against programs that they had already faced off against during the regular season, and, of course, for the second time, you had a hard-fought battle between Cal and Navy, with, of course, Cal ultimately taking the national championship once again, defeating Navy by a final score of 36-22. That game was, of course, on YouTube. It was great watching that. Found out after the fact that there was a watch party apparently over there at the Kingfish. Damn, I wish I would have known that ahead of time. So for future reference, gotta have to find out if the next time Cal Rugby goes to the national championship, if that will be happening again, and try to get everyone together and do something over there. Cal Rugby going undefeated, of course, in the spring half of their schedule. They're one of the few programs that, of course, plays during both the fall and at the spring semesters. Overall, between the fall and the spring, Cal Rugby finished off with a record of 35-2 overall. They were ended with a 33-match win streak. They were 8-0 at home, 7-0 on the road, and they were 20-2 in matches that took place at neutral sites. So another championship wrapped up, of course, for the lads that make up the Cal Rugby program. And on that note, that is not it, of course, for the Cal Athletic Talk, but hey, we're almost over 45-plus minutes in here, and we're not even out of the first segment yet. I need to take a break. So on that note, let's go ahead and hop on in to the first break of the evening, morning, afternoon, whatever time frame it is for y'all. It's evening, of course, obviously, for me as I record this on July the 29th. I think it is, yeah, July 29th. You know, never know. Sometimes the days, weeks run into each other. But let's go ahead and take our first break of this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. When we come back at y'all, we, of course, will be taking a look back at how Cal baseball did, and we will also be going back into the past again with myself and the rest of the cast to discuss things with how they went with the final three home games of the season for Cal baseball. Along with that, we will also take a look back at how Cal men's and Cal women's basketball did, how Cal softball did, how Cal lacrosse did, and Cal beach volleyball as well. And, of course, given that there's still two segments to go after that, there's a whole lot of Cal athletic talk to take a look back at how they performed at in the spring semester. Don't go anywhere. Be right back at you here in a bit on show number 57 of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. And welcome back, fellow Tightwads, fellow Cal Athletics fans, as we continue on down the road with this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. 30th and current sitting governor of Tightwad Hill, Keith Salmonen, coming at you from Dub 6 Studios located in the Diamond District of Oakland, California, in what, of course, is the evening of July the 29th for me. It's whenever and whenever for y'all that are tuning into this broadcast, regardless if you caught it once it went live for everyone's viewing pleasure at 6 a.m. in the morning on July the 30th or at any point in time and day after all that. Of course, as always, thank you for tuning in and supporting this fan-ran podcast that's brought to you by a 103-year-old pile of dirt overlooking a 103-year-old college football stadium in Strawberry Canyon. Joined, of course, through recording technology by the 29th and emeritus governor of Tightwad, Tad Dillinger III. Two of those at the moment, by the way, and yours truly will become the third when my final term ends in 2028. Taddy and, of course, Gary, the 27th governor of Tightwad, are the two governor emerituses. Mark, who's the 28th governor, it's been a minute since he's last been up there, but whenever and should he come back up there, obviously he would get that title and would be, of course, welcomed into the Tightwad cabinet as well. And, of course, Taddy and Donnie will be joining me again here in a little bit when we get to the point in time needed for them, as we, of course, have baseball talk coming your way, which, of course, now with us out of the first break of the show, let's get right back into the Cal Athletic Recap talk, as, of course, we take a look back once again at what Cal Athletic programs did to close out the 2026 spring semester, recapping dates, of course, for the sports programs that we are taking a look at on this edition of the show, going down from the time frame of February the 17th through June the 11th, because, of course, the last time we did a show was all the way back on February the 16th. Leading off things here in the second segment of this edition of the show is how things played out for the Cal baseball program over the course of the 2026 season. We pick back up on the action with them with a 3-game series that was played in Irvine from February the 20th through February the 22nd, road contest at UC Irvine. Cal dropped the first game of the series on February the 20th by a final of 5-3. They took a blowout win in Game 2 on February the 21st by a final of 11-2, and they would win the rubber match before leaving Irvine on February the 22nd to take 2 out of 3 against UC Irvine, the rubber match being won by a final score of 4-2. A game that was originally supposed to be scheduled between Cal and UC Davis on February the 24th at Stu Gordon Stadium ended up being canceled. If I remember correctly, it was because of rain going down that day. The game would be rescheduled, or actually, no, it was supposed to be a 1-1 series. They were going to play the first game in Berkeley, and then, of course, the game on the 25th at UC Davis. The game on the 24th, of course, got canceled, didn't get made up. And, of course, they then played at UC Davis on February the 25th, Cal taking that contest against UC Davis by a final score of 7-2. 3-game series back in Berkeley beginning on February the 27th and running through March the 1st. That, of course, being between Cal and Sacramento State. Cal took Game 1 on February the 27th by a final score of 5-4. They also won Game 2 by a final score of 8-2 on February the 28th, and they, of course, closed out the 3-game series with Sacramento State in Berkeley with a win on 3-2 on March the 1st to get a 3-game series sweep of the Sacramento State Hornets. 1-game matchup going down on March the 4th against CSU Bakersfield. Myself and Duncan going out to that contest to celebrate my belated 41st birthday. Cal stomping CSU Bakersfield in that contest in Berkeley by a final score of 15-6. March the 6th through the 8th would see March the 6th through the 8th would see a 4-game series with a doubleheader sandwiched in the mix of that, going down against San Diego at Stu Gordon Stadium. Cal taking the first game on March the 6th by a final score of 11-1. They took Game 1 of the doubleheader on March 7th by a final of 15-9. They took Game 2 of the doubleheader by a final score of 9-1, and then they, of course, picked up a 4-game sweep with a 5-2 victory over San Diego to close out that series, or that 4-game series on March the 8th. March the 10th would see a 3-2 loss on the road in San Jose against San Jose State before you would have a 3-game series at home to begin ACC play against North Carolina. Those 3 games going down March 13th through the 15th at Stu Gordon Stadium. Cal losing game 1 by a final score of 8-1. They would lose game 2 by a final score of 6-2, and then ultimately would get swept in the finale of the 3-game series by a final score of 10-2. Game 1 again was a 8-1 loss on March 13th, a 6-2 loss on March 14th, and a 10-2 loss to get swept by North Carolina on March the 15th. Following that, you would have a 1-game matchup on March 17th in Berkeley between Cal and UConn. The Bears would unfortunately drop that contest by a final score of 9-3. They would head out on the road after that, beginning with a 3-game series at Boston College that was played March 20th through the 22nd. They would lose game 1 on March 20th by a final of 4-3. Game 2 would be an L for the Bears on March 21st by a final of 9-6, and Boston College would end up sealing the sweep with a 3-2 victory over Cal at Chestnut Hill on March the 22nd. 3-game series and another ACC matchup continuing the road trip after that as Cal would head into Wake Forest for a 3-game series March the 27th through the 29th, it looks like here. Cal would drop game 1 of that 3-game series to Wake Forest by a final score of 9-5. Game 2 on March 28th would see Cal lose once again by a final score of 4-1 before finally on March 29th, Cal picking up a victory for the first time in what seemed like a good, decent minute there as they would get out of Dodge from Wake Forest on the 29th with a 5-3 victory. March the 31st, there was a game that had been scheduled in Berkeley against St. Mary's. That game, of course, ended up ultimately getting canceled, again, because of weather factor, if I remember correctly. After that, 3-game series in Berkeley against Georgia Tech. The first game going down on April the 2nd, which saw Cal get blown out by Georgia Tech by a final score of 17-2. Cal would lose game 2 of that series by a final score of 7-2 on April 3rd, and then they would lose the finale of that 3-game series to Georgia Tech on April 4th by a final score of 9-3. After that, they had one game against San Francisco, USF, and that, of course, took place at USF on April the 6th. Cal actually shut out USF in that contest by a final score of 8-0, before going out on the road once again, starting off with a 3-game series at Pittsburgh, which began on April the 10th and saw the series open up with a 12-1 win over Pittsburgh. Cal would also win the Game 2 contest on April 11th by a final of 14-6, and they would close out the series in Pittsburgh with a sweep on April the 12th, winning by a final score of 13-2. After that, they, of course, would come back to Berkeley for a quick little 1-game matchup against San Jose State, which they would end up losing by a final of 10-7. That game taking place on April the 15th. April the 17th, 3-game series beginning against Louisville, which would see Cal take game 1 by a final score of 8-5 on April the 17th. Cal would win game 2 of the series against Louisville on April the 18th by a final score of 6-5. They would ultimately drop the finale of the contest against Louisville on April the 19th, losing that matchup by a final score of 8-5. April the 22nd saw USF come into town to take on the Golden Bears. Cal already beat them earlier in the schedule on the road at USF. They're trying to get a little bit of revenge against their Golden Bears in this one, which would go into extra innings on April the 22nd. Cal would end up winning that 10-inning extra inning affair against USF by a final score of 4-3. April the 24th through the 26th saw a three-game series go down on the road in Florida against Miami. Cal taking the opening game of the series on April the 24th by a final score of 9-2. They would drop game 2 of the series on April the 25th by a final of 4-3, and then ultimately would lose the rubber match to Miami on April the 26th by a final score of 4-1. They would come back for a one-game matchup in Moraga against St. Mary's on the 28th, winning that contest by a final of 6-5 before hosting a one-game matchup against UC Davis. I'm guessing that's actually, they did make up the UC Davis game, apparently. Completely forgot about that. It's been 5+ months since we last did a show, so a lot of stuff's gone on between frickin' February the 17th and now. April the 29th against UC Davis in Berkeley, Cal losing that contest by a final score of 6-1. Three-game series against Virginia Tech going down after that at Stu Gordon Stadium from May 1st through May the 3rd. Cal would lose Game 1 to Virginia Tech by a final of 9-1. They would lose Game 2 against VT on May the 2nd by a final of 6-2, and they would take the victory in the final game of the series on May 3rd by a final score of 9-4. Road game on May the 5th out in Stockton, a lone game matchup against Pacific out in Stockton, California on May 5th that would see a 2-1 victory play out for the Golden Bears. May 8th through the 10th, they would go on the road to take on Virginia out in Charlotte. Cal would win Game 1 of the series on May 8th by a final of 7-4. Dropped Game 2 on May the 9th by a final score of 2-1, and then Cal would take the rubber match against Virginia on May 10th by a final score of 8-7. And on that note, before we get into what happened with the final 3 home games and the final 3 regular season games of the year, let's go ahead and rewind once again back to the past, to that final game, the day of the final game of the series that we're about to recap over out in the good old Tightwad Grove at Stu Gordon Stadium. Back to the past on May the 16th, once again with myself, Tad Dillinger III, and Donnie Knucklehead Hudson.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second and final time to the past on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid. It is, of course, 30th Governor of Tightwad Hill, Keith Salmon, and 29th Governor of Tightwad Hill, Tad Dillinger III, and Donnie Knucklehead Hudson at the end of the day here for the final game of the 3-game series between Cal baseball and Stanford baseball. Yours truly, of course, has already recapped a whole bunch of Cal action coming up to this. We decided, of course, to quickly recap with you all the final 3 games of the regular season from us 3 mofos that, of course, watch these 3 games in person. Starting off, of course, first with the Thursday night contest, the first of the 3 games back on May the 14th to start off what's known as the big series between Stanford and Cal. A little bit of a fugly one, to the point that the 3 of us actually left before the game was over with. Taddy had stuff he had to go do. Donnie was getting cold. I had a headache and was starting to fall asleep by about the 5th inning. Stanford went out to a 7-2 lead at one point in Thursday's contest. Cal started to slowly pick at things, though, and work their way back in. Almost made the comeback, though, but unfortunately they dropped the opening game of this 3-game series to Stanford by the final score of 7-6. Gentlemen, that was a very ugly game to open up this 3-game series.
Yes, it was. As things to do, it was cold, and the offense wasn't doing nothing, and the pitching gave up a lot of runs early. So it's difficult to win at that point.
I got home at 11:30 at night. Bart sucks, but not everything can be Bartable. That's the first game. The next day, my neighbor down the street says, "Well, you guys almost came back and won." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Game 2, of course, which went down yesterday, Friday the 15th, would go as follows. Cal would actually jump out to an early 2-0 lead and hold that 2-0 lead for the majority of the contest. Stanford, though, would score 3 runs in the top of the 7th inning to take a 3-2 lead. Cal, though, would score 2 runs before the inning of the game was over with to take a 4-3 advantage and ultimately would win the middle game of the series by a final score of 4-3. Definitely a better performance by the Golden Bears on Friday than it was on Thursday.
As again on Friday, I had to leave early, but I saw it on. I picked up the phone and saw that, and it was like, yeah. So we're not 0 for whatever at this point.
Oh, they smoked a couple home runs last night. It was exciting. That was fun. Friday night, the crowd was packed. It was nice weather. It was nice. Cal Bears won.
The finale of that 3-game series, the rubber match, of course, going down on May the 16th and just wrapping up a little while ago for us here as we're, of course, chilling out in the good old Tightwad Grove. Stanford actually jumped out to a 1-0 lead in this contest. Late in the game, though, Cal would retake the lead with the tying run and the go-ahead run in the latter innings as Cal would pick up the W and win the series by a final score of 2-1. Bringing, of course, our grand total win-loss record at Cal baseball this year, finishing under 500, unfortunately, for Tightwad this year. Cal was 2-4 when we were on deck for games this year. Me, overall, they were 3-4. Of course, as many of y'all remember, I was out here for the game on March the 4th that they ended up winning. But, hey, it is what it is. They ended up taking 2 out of 3 against the hated Stanford Cardinal, and we just got to sit back now and wait to see who they're going to be facing in the ACC tournament.
It was good to actually see a win, and it was definitely fun coming out for baseball all season. Go Bears.
It's my first year and only year ever to go to Cal baseball, although I've always been a Cal guy. Basketball, tennis, football, of course. I really enjoyed it. I'll do it again next year.
This, of course, is the last time that you will be hearing from Tad and Donnie until we do our Cal football season preview show on August the 29th. So before we go ahead and continue on continue farther on down the road here in show number 57, let's go ahead and let Tad and Donnie get their final thoughts of the evening in.
Well, football is coming up, fellas and dames. We're going to have a lot better football season this year. Go Bears.
Sellout crowds at Memorial Stadium, especially after the media. Oh, that's us. The Chronicle, CNN, World News Tonight. You're going to be hearing about the Bears by about the 4th game because we're going to come out. We're going to smoke.
Tad, Donnie, it's always great to have y'all on here. Definitely looking forward to having y'all back on the show in a couple months when we do the football preview show on August the 29th. On that note, let's go ahead and head back to Dub 6 Studios and the present, with me in the present, to continue on down the road with this 57th edition of the Bear Raid.
Thank you once again, of course, to myself and the guys in the past. We, of course, as I've already mentioned, we will be joined again on the 29th of August when we do the Cal football season preview show. That'll be the next time you'll get to hear from good old Tad Dillinger III and Donnie Knucklehead Hudson here on the show. Taddy, of course, nearing the tail end last month or so of his visit out to New York that he roughly ends up doing roughly around this time every year. We'll be back about a day or two before we do the next that preview show. Donnie, of course, is scheduled to be there as well, and as I mentioned earlier, might have Boss Man, might also have Eric Mad Dog Manson here. We'll have to ultimately wait and see on that. Let's go ahead and get ready to wrap up the Cal baseball talk here and continue on into other athletic programs here, because we do still have other Cal athletic programs to talk about, not just on this segment of the show, but we still got a whole couple other segments afterwards later on as well. Cal would have one more game that would go down after that 3-game series to close out things at home against Stanford. One and done, unfortunately, for your Golden Bears in the ACC tournament in Charlotte, North Carolina on May the 19th, where for the 4th time in basically a week, they would play Stanford yet again. So, yeah, 2 out of 3 against Stanford, and you get to play Stanford once again in the ACC tournament. But again, unfortunately, one and done for Cal baseball as they would drop that match to Stanford on May 19th by a final score of 11-4 to close out what was basically an up and down season for your California Golden Bears. They at one point were on the hottest win streak that they had been on since basically the 1989 season, over damn near nearly 40 freaking years ago. And then just things, fell off into the deep end once they got to the ACC portion of the schedule. Injuries definitely played a factor. Definitely at times where it seemed like stuff was off with the guys coming in the bullpen. Overall, they finished off with a record of 29-26. So the program did finish 3 games above 500 with a 527 win percentage. They were 12-18 though in conference play, so 400 percentage there, and that's really what ultimately killed them. Finished the season off, of course, with that 1-game losing streak as they, of course, lost their one-and-done match against Stanford in the ACC tournament. At home this year at Stu Gordon Stadium, they were only a game above 500 as they were 15-4 at the Stu. Away from Berkeley, they had a 14-11 record, so 3 games above 500, and the low neutral site game, of course, being the one-and-done AC tournament game, was an 0-1 record for them. So, season that started off with a lot of hope and a lot of high expectations, especially with the way that they were playing out the gate. Not going the way they want to, but definitely a lot to look forward to. Got guys that are going to be coming back, guys they brought in. One of their players, of course, going in the MLB draft. And I guess also you can be excited, about the fact that Jeff Kent, Cal baseball alumni, going into the MLB Hall of Fame. So it wasn't a total waste for Cal baseball in 2026, but definitely could feel like we could probably all agree that things could have probably played out a lot better than they did for Golden Bears baseball in 2026. But hey, just sit back, refocus, restart, and do what you got to do to get ready to get things going for the program when the 2027 season gets underway. Moving from the baseball diamond to the hardwood, we're going to go ahead now and take a look back at what the basketball programs ended up doing over the remaining course of their times for the season from February the 17th through the June 11th time frame. They obviously got over way earlier than June, but again, been a minute since we did a show, so that's why we're touch bases on this right now. We'll start off first with the men's program before we get into the Lady Golden Bears program. For the men, we begin the recaps back on February the 21st when Cal men's basketball hosted Stanford at the Haas Pavilion in Berkeley. Cal winning that contest by a final score of 72-66. February the 25th, they would be in Berkeley again to host SMU, taking the victory in that one by a final score of 73-69. February the 28th would see a loss on the road against Pittsburgh by a final score of 72-56. March the 4th would see a 76-65 win on the road in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. March the 7th, they would be out in North Carolina and unfortunately would take a loss against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons in that one, losing by a final of 80-73. ACC tournament would be a one-and-done deal for the men's basketball program, and the lone ACC tournament game that they played on March the 11th out in Charlotte, North Carolina, they ended up losing by a final score of 95-89. Didn't get invited to the March Madness tournament, but they did end up getting an invite to the 2026 NIT. First game the Cal played in that, which was on March the 18th in Berkeley, California. They ended up winning the contest against UIC by a final score of 91-73. March the 22nd, though, would see their NIT run come to an end as they would lose on the 27th at the Haas against St. Joseph's by a final score of 76-75. Final run overall for the Cal men's basketball program, which again is another one of them programs that stretches from the fall, the late fall, into about the early to mid-spring time frame. Overall, between 2025 and 2026, Cal men's basketball finished off with a record of 22-12. They had an even 500 record in conference play at 9-9. Home record 17-5, so not too bad of a home win-loss record to the Haas Pavilion. Away from the Haas, though, they were 4-6 this year, and they ended up going 1-1 in neutral site games. Definitely was a lot more than many of us possibly. Let me start over that again, getting all tongue twisted and stuff. Definitely could have, and many of us feel should have been a lot better for the men's basketball program, and it's going to, when you see here in a little bit, end up being the same case when we get to the Lady Golden Bears as well. Definitely a lot higher expectation. Many felt that they should have been able to have gotten in to the March Madness tournament. Would have performing a lot better there at the end of the season and doing better in the ACC tournament would have helped that out. But is what it is. Same thing like with the baseball program. You got to retune, readjust, restart, fine-tune things, and make sure that you do a better job going into the 2026-2027 season. Staying on the hardwood, we will go ahead and shift from the men's basketball program to the women's basketball program and see how things ultimately went down for them from February the 17th through the end of their spring semester campaign. Action for the Lady Golden Bears, we pick up with things on February the 19th with a road game in Tallahassee, Florida, which saw Cal defeat Florida State by a final score of 75-62. February the 22nd, they would stay in Florida for a road contest at Miami that they would unfortunately lose by the final score of 69-60. Cal women's basketball would be back at the Haas Pavilion on February the 26th for a matchup against Clemson that they would lose by a final score of 70-63. They would stay at the Haas for what would be their final regular season and final home game of the year on March the 1st and pick up a 78-34 win over SMU. ACC tournament, they fared a little better than the men's program. They at least didn't go one and done like the men's team did. Cal's ACC tournament run on the women's side of the basketball programs began on March the 4th against Wake Forest. Cal winning that contest by a final score of 75-52. They would, though, get bounced from the tournament on March the 5th when they ended up getting handed a 70-59 loss against Syracuse. Like the men, they did end up getting invited to the women's equivalent of the NIT. It ended up going a little bit longer than the men did as well. First game in the women's, the WBIT, which is, again, the women's equivalent of the NIT, was on March the 19th at the Haas. Cal beating Santa Clara in that contest by a final of 72-68. They would win again on March the 22nd out in Kansas with an 83-75 victory against Kansas State. Their WBT run, though, would come to an end on March the 26th at the Haas Pavilion against Columbia in the quarterfinals, as they would lose by a final score of 74-68. Overall, between the 2025 fall portion of the schedule and their 2026 spring portion of the schedule, Cal women's basketball finished off at an overall record of 21-15. They were 9-9 in conference play, similar to the men's program. 14-5 at the Haas Pavilion. They were 5-6 away from the Haas Pavilion, and they were 2-4 in neutral site contests. So again, years that could have been better, and a lot more were expected of both the men's and the women's program. But hey, build on what you did here. Look to improve when the next season gets underway. Let's go ahead and move back from the hardwood to the diamond. Just instead of the baseball diamond, will be the softball diamond this go around. As of course we take a look back at how things played out from February the 17th on through the end of things for them. Taking a look now at what the Cal softball program ended up doing over the course of their run for their 2026 spring semester. And again, February 27th through the end of their season are the time frames we are looking at here. Let's see here. February the 19th is where we pick up with things for Cal softball at the Mary Nutter Collegiate Classic down in Palm Springs. First game of that tournament would be played against UC San Diego, and would see the Cal women win that contest in 5 innings because of the mercy rule by a final score of 4-1. February the 20th. Would see another matchup in that tournament out in Palm Springs, which would be a loss against Fresno State by a final of 5-4. February the 20th, they played multiple games on the 20th. They would also suffer an 8-3 loss against Nevada. February the 21st would be a 5-7 loss against Oklahoma. February the 22nd would be a 19-5 loss against Auburn. And the final game of that tournament in Palm Springs would be a 6-0 loss to Nebraska. February the 26th would be the Judy Garman Classic, which is played out in Fullerton, California. The first of 2 games on February the 26th would see Cal lose to BYU by a final score of 7-6. Game 2 that they had on the 26th against Florida, they would lose by a final of 8-0 in 5 innings. February the 27th, they would win against Seattle University by a final score of 4-3. They would then defeat Oregon State in the first of 2 games on February the 28th. By a final of 6-3 before suffering a 9-3 loss to Cal State Fullerton in the second of 2 games on February the 28th. Final game of that tournament in Fullerton was on March the 1st for California Golden Bears. They would win that one in 5 innings by a final of 16-0 against East Texas A&M University. March the 6th would see the start of a 3-game series in Sacramento that would run from March 6th through the 8th. Technically home games for your California Golden Bears, but remember, due to the softball field being completely redeveloped and rebuilt, Cal played all of their home games away from Berkeley this year at 2 different locations. The first of those 2 locations being Shea Stadium in Sacramento, California, which is where the Sacramento State women's softball team plays at, I believe. March 6th through the 8th, 3-game series against Duke. They would lose the first game in 5 innings on March the 6th by a final of 12-0. They would lose Game 2 of the series on March the 7th to Duke by a final of 3-1 before getting swept in the third and final game of the series against Duke on March 8th by a final score of 7-2. March 10th, they would play on the road at Stockton and pick up a W by a final of 6-5. They would head out to Saratoga, California, and I believe that's where they ended up playing the remainder of their home games this season, with a 3-game series against North Carolina that went down from March 13th through the 15th. They picked up a loss in 8 innings on March the 13th by a final of 11-6. Took Game 2 of the series against North Carolina on March 14th by a final of 6-5 before they would drop the rubber match against NCU on March 15th by a final score of 13-5. March the 20th would see the start of a 3-game series in Tallahassee against Florida State. Cal would lose the first game of that 3-game series on the 20th in 5 innings by a final of 12-2. They would drop Game 2 of the series on March the 21st against Florida State in 5 innings as well by a final of 9-0. And they would ultimately get swept out of Tallahassee on March the 22nd in a third consecutive 5-inning game for a third consecutive loss against Florida State, that one ending in a final of 9-1. March the 25th, solo game matchup on the road against Dayton in Columbus, Ohio. Your Lady Golden Bears winning that matchup by a final score of 12-7. March the 25th, you would see a single contest as well out in Columbus against Ohio State, where Cal got whomped 10-3 by the Buckeyes. March the 28th, on the road in South Bend, would see a 6-2 loss befall the Golden Bears at the hands of Notre Dame. That would be the start of a 3-game series over in South Bend. Cal would take Game 2 of the series by a final of 10-2 on March the 29th before they would drop the rubber match on March the 29th against Notre Dame in 8 innings by a final score of 9-7. 3-game series at the temporary home in Saratoga beginning on April the 2nd and running through April the 4th against Louisville. Cal winning the first game of that 3-game series on April the 2nd by a final score of 7-5. They would lose Game 2 on April the 3rd by a final of 6-3 before getting blown out in the finale of the 3-game series and rubber match on April the 4th by Louisville, losing by a final of 12-2. April the 10th through the 11th, or excuse me, April the 10th through the 12th, would see a 3-game contest on the road against North Carolina State. Cal dropped Game 1 of that series on April the 10th by a final of 14-8. They would also lose Game 2 of the series on April the 11th by a final of 4-5 before getting swept by North Carolina in the third and final game of the series on April the 12th by a final score of 10-9. April the 16th, you would see a single-game matchup against Cal State University Northridge, I believe. Cal would lose that by a final of 6-3. 3-game series in in Los Angeles against UCLA. 2-game series that ended up being a doubleheader on the road against UCLA on April the 18th, and Cal would lose both games in that doubleheader, losing Game 1 in 5 innings by a final of 13-5, and then they would lose Game 2 of the doubleheader against the Bruins by a final of 9-1. April 21st, they were supposed to play on the road against St. Mary's in Moraga. That game ended up being canceled. They would end up playing at Stanford for 3 games, April the 24th through the 26th, and would get swept by the Cardinal, unfortunately, in that one. They would lose Game 1 on the 24th of April in 5 innings by a final of 17-1, lose Game 2 in 6 innings against Stanford on the 25th of April by a final of 9-0, and then, of course, would drop the finale of the 3-game series and ended up getting swept by Stanford on April the 26th by a final score of 5-0. Road trip out to Pittsburgh after that, over in good old Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, May 1st through the 3rd, which would see them lose the first game on the 1st by a final of 14-6. They would they would pick up the W against Pittsburgh in Game 2 on May the 2nd by a final score of 11-0 in 5 innings. They would pick up the rubber match victory in 6 innings on Sunday, May the 3rd, taking out Pittsburgh by a final of 9-1. And that was the final game of the season for them, as they would close out on the road, winning 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh. Season, of course, new coach at the helm, a lot of high expectations. Ended up not materializing, unfortunately, on the field for Cal baseball in 2026. They finished off the year with a dismal 15-37 overall record. They were 5-19 in conference play. Did end the year on a 2-game winning streak. Home game record this year, even though they technically were playing, unfortunately, at temporary homes, and I wonder if that factored in to things at all. They were 2-10 between their 2 temporary home venues. They were 5-15 on the road, and were 8-12 in neutral site contest. Kind of a little understandable. Got new head coach running the program, so it sometimes goes either way, where things could either be good, sometimes things could be bad. Obviously, in this case, unfortunately, ended up going sideways for Cal softball this season. But hey, just put it behind you, build on things, and hopefully you're able to turn things around. The crazy thing was there were a lot of games from what I remember watching, especially the close games, were times out there where it seemed like they were going to be able to score or did a good job scoring, and then just would turn around and let the opponents walk back into them. And then obviously, though, you also had games, too, where they weren't able to really muster across much of anything. So, hey, put it in the rearview mirror, work on it, build on the positives that you got out of this season, and just ready to hit the ground running again when Cal softball resumes in 2027. Two more sports to take a look at here. Man, these segments dragging on. Hey, this is what happens again when you end up, unfortunately, not doing a show for over 5 months. Still got two more segments to go through here before we get into the second break of the broadcast here on this 57th edition of TBR. Taking a look, of course, now at what Cal Lacrosse ended up doing in 2026. Begin the action with them and for their recaps on February the 19th with a matchup that went down up in Eugene, Oregon, where Cal defeated Oregon by a final score of 19-4. February the 23rd would see Cal Lacrosse back in Berkeley for a matchup against UC Davis that they would lose by a single point, dropping the contest to the Aggies by a final score of 13-12. February the 28th in Durham, North Carolina would see them lose to Duke by a final score of 16-7. March the 3rd, they would lose by a final of 13-3 on the road at Syracuse. They would come back to Berkeley for a match that took place at California Memorial Stadium on March the 7th against Boston College, unfortunately losing that one by a final score of 15-8. March the 9th would see them pick up a victory over Stone Hill, another matchup that was played at California Memorial Stadium, 17-10 victory for Cal Lacrosse in that one. March the 12th, again at California Memorial Stadium, they would host North Carolina, and unfortunately, Cal would get blown out by the Tar Heels by a final of 20-3. March 16th, they would host Marist at California Memorial Stadium and win that contest by a final of 18-10. Damn, a lot of home games and a lot of matchups at Cal Memorial Stadium for the lacrosse program. Finally, though, going back out on the road once again on March the 21st, where they suffered a 12-5 loss at Louisville. March the 24th, they would take on Xavier and defeat them on the road by the final of 11-2. They would head into Notre Dame on March the 28th and unfortunately lose to them by the final score of 7-4. April the 3rd would see them back in Berkeley at California Memorial Stadium for what unfortunately ended up being a 17-8 loss against Clemson. They would host Virginia Tech at Memorial Stadium on April the 11th and lose to them by a final of 10-5. Stanford and them would, of course, face off to close out their season, and Cal Women's Lacrosse unfortunately losing to Stanford 17-5 to close out their season. 2026 saw the lacrosse program go 6-11 overall, 1-9 in conference play. They ended the season on a four-match losing streak, 3-5 at home, 3-6 away, and no neutral site contests for the lacrosse program in 2026. So again, definitely a lot that needs to be built on for that program heading into the next season of theirs in the spring of 2027. Finally, before we take our next break here on this edition of the show, we're going to go ahead and take a look at what the Beach Volleyball program ended up doing for their spring campaign. Just give me a quick second here to get the schedule loaded up on my end, so that way I can recap how things happened with them. Their season literally started days after we did the last edition of the show, which, of course, again, was on February the 16th. Beach Volleyball got underway on February the 19th with them taking a loss against Stanford by a final of 3-2. They would also suffer a 3-2 loss in another matchup that they played on February the 19th against LMU. They would lose 3-2 in the first of two matches on February the 20th. This first one against the University of Texas, they would lose 3-2. And then, of course, the second of two matches on February the 20th would be another loss, this time coming at the hands of USC, losing that contest by a final of 3-2. Matchup that was supposed to take place against UCLA on February the 21st ended up being canceled before Cal Beach Volleyball picked up a 3-0 victory on February the 21st against the University of Hawaii. February the 27th, they finally would come and play their first matches in Berkeley, picking up a 5-0 victory in the first of two matches on February the 27th against Sacramento State. They would also pick up a 5-0 victory over UC Davis in the second of those two matches on February the 27th. 5-0 victory again in the first of two matches on February the 28th, the first match against the University of San Francisco, before they would pick up a second 5-0 victory later in the day on the 28th against the University of the Pacific. March 6th would see them play two contests yet again down in Los Angeles. They would lose 5-0 in the first contest on March the 6th by a final of 5-0 before picking up a victory later in the day against Louisiana State University by a final of 4-1. Two contests again on March the 7th, the first contest being a 3-2 victory over Grand Canyon University. They also got a 4-1 victory later in the day on the 7th of March over the University of Washington by a final of 4-1. East Meets West going down March 13th out in Manhattan would see Cal win that by the final of 3-2. They would also pick up a 4-1 victory later in the day on March 13th over Arizona State. March 14th, pick up a 5-0 victory in the first of two matches on the 14th over Florida International University. They would also defeat the University of Texas later in the day on March 14th, or excuse me, they would lose to the University of Texas later in the day on March 14th by a final of 3-2. March the 20th, two matches out in Death Valley. The first against, or excuse me, the first, well, it was part of the Death Valley Invitational, played out in Baton Rouge. First of two matches on March 20th, which Cal would get a 3-2 victory against Boise State before they would drop the second match on the 20th to Florida State by a final of 4-1. Two matches once again on the 21st of March, the first one being a 4-1 victory against Georgia State. They would also pick up a victory later in the day on March 21st against the University of Texas by a final of 3-2. April the 3rd, they would face off against UC Davis and San Jose State University, winning against UC Davis by a final of 4-1 and beating San Jose State by a final of 4-1 as well, before facing off against the same two programs again on April the 4th. They would defeat San Jose State in the first match on the 4th by a final of 5-0 and defeat UC Davis in the later match on April the 4th by a score of 5-0 as well. Center of Efforts Challenge going down April the 10th through the 11th for them to getting all sidetracked and caught up again, my bad. First of two matches in the Center of Effort Challenge for Cal Beach Volleyball on April the 10th. First one would be a 4-1 victory over Arizona State before they would take a loss later in the day to UCLA by a final of 4-1. Two matches on April the 11th that would see them lose the first one to Cal Poly by a final of 4-1, and they would defeat TCU later in the day on the 11th by the final of 4-1. Stanford West Coast Classic going down after that with two matches on April the 17th, which saw the first match being a 4-1 victory over Pepperdine, and then they lost 3-2 later in the day on April 17th against Stanford. April the 18th, they would take on Cal Poly in the first of two matches on the 18th and lose that by the final of 5-0 before picking up a 5-0 victory later in the day against San Jose State. MPSF Championship going down after that. On April the 22nd, they would lose against USC by a final of 3-1. They would pick up a 3-1 victory on April the 23rd against the University of Washington. They would then take a 3-0 loss later in the day on April the 23rd against UCLA by a final of 3-0. NCAA Championship play going down after that. Cal would defeat Long Beach State in the first match of the NCAA Championship on May the 1st by a final of 3-2 before they would ultimately end up losing to Stanford and getting bounced from the championship on May the 2nd, losing to the Cardinal by a final of 3-1. Cal Beach Volleyball finished off the year with a record of 24-14. They were 16-5 at home, 2-2 on the road, and 6-7 in neutral site contests. And that wraps up this segment of Cal Athletic Talk. Thank God I need to catch my breath after getting winded with that hour and 40-plus minutes in and halfway in to this broadcast. Definitely looking like going to be a 2-plus hour edition of the show, which is always good. It's been a minute since we did all that, and again, that's what ends up happening when you end up having 5 months plus worth of stuff to discuss on the show. End of the Cal Athletics talk for now, but not the end of it for this 57th edition of the Buried, of course. We come back at you from the next break here on this 57th edition of TPR. We will go ahead and recap action for Cal men's and women's gymnastics, Cal men's and women's swim and dive, Cal women's water polo, and, of course, Cal track and field as well. And, hey, there's still a whole segment with at least 6 other sports after that to go down as well. Don't go anywhere. Be back at you in a bit. Halfway through things here on show number 57 of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Tightwads, fellow California Golden Bears fans, the collagenum that makes up the greater Calgorithm in the college football fandom. Welcome back after a long, unplanned 5-month hiatus as we're halfway through this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Yours truly, of course, the 30th and current sitting governor of Tightwad, Keith Salmonen, coming at you from Dub 6 Studios located in the Diamond District of Oakland, California. Joined, of course, through the abilities of recording technology by my co-hosts, Tad Dillinger III, who, of course, is the 29th and emeritus governor of Tightwad Hill, and, of course, none other than good old Donnie Knucklehead Hudson, who, of course, alongside Jenny Ortega and Burt Brown are in the early runnings already for when the election for governor of Tightwad comes up again in 2028. Halfway through the Cal Athletic Talk, and we still got a whole lot more to go. Still 2 more segments full of at least 12 Cal Athletic programs to recap here before we finally shut the door on things with this 57th edition of the Bear Raid. Kick back for a day on my end, and then get ready to do it all again on July the 31st with the spring semester and review show, where pretty much do it all again with all this stuff that I'm doing right now, plus the stuff that happened before February the 17th for all the various athletic programs. So, yeah, definitely still got a whole lot to come at you here before we are all said and done on this edition of TBR. Things could move slow, fast, depends, because obviously, for any of you that have watched shows in the past, pretty sure you all are aware that there are occasions where we've come across some of the programs to recap stuff, and they completely forget to even post any sort of a recap for the sport on the Cal Bears website, which, you know, kind of baffling. It's calbears.com. It's the official website for the athletic program. It's like, can't you gents make sure that you're posting what the programs do? Not just obviously for the fans to follow, but obviously, you know, students there, their families, you know, is what it is. Anyway, before I get all sidetracked, let's go ahead and continue on with the Cal Athletics recap talk on this edition of the show. As again, we cover the time frame from February the 17th through June the 11th, recapping how things played out for the various programs that begin and do their sports actions plays. Man, I always be coming up with crazy random stuff out of nowhere. The various Cal athletic programs that, of course, do their various sporting shindigs during the spring semester. Next on the docket here, we got the gymnastics programs. The men and the women. Will go ahead and start off first with what the men's gymnastics program did to finish off their year. We begin with the recap action for them on February the 28th as part of the Stanford International Collegiate. That, of course, going down on February the 28th and March the 7th. Losing to Stanford on February the 28th by a final of 323.900 to 312.850. They would lose to Oklahoma on March the 7th by a final of 331.600 to 315.700. After that, March the 14th, they would be partaking in the Stanford Quad Meet. They would lose once again to Stanford, 322.700 to 311.550, and would lose a matchup later in the day, or excuse me, they would win a matchup later in the day against Air Force at that same meet by a final of 311.550 to 308.100. March the 21st would see a matchup at the Haas Pavilion in Berkeley against Oklahoma, which Cal would lose by a final of 325.250 to 315.100. Following that was the MPSF Championship, which went down on April the just want to make sure that I didn't say first. Okay, April the 4th. I just want to make sure I'm getting my dates right here as I'm reading this. MPSF Championship, 3 matches going down for them on April the 4th. They would win the first one against Air Force by a final of 317.750 to 303.800, lose to Oklahoma 327.200 to 317.750, and lose to Stanford 332.100 to 317.750. NCAA Championship qualifier April 17th for the men's program, and they would see them in a multitude of face-offs in that, 5 to be exact, all on April the 17th, losing to Oklahoma 322.825 to 312.026, lost to Nebraska 320.059 to 312.026. They'd take a loss against a loss against Ohio State, 320.294 to 312.026. Let's see, a W against Springfield College, 312.026 to 306.426, and a victory over Greenville, 312.026 to 307.059. NCAA Championship was on April the 18th. It was individuals only that was in that one. Opening that up real quick to see if any of the Golden Bears on the men's side did anything. Let's see, 9 members of the men's Golden Bears gymnastic program closed out their season in front of a raucous crowd at State Farm Arena back on, April the 18th. For individuals with 6 qualifying squads. So only individual stuff on that one. Let's go ahead and see here real quick if they have an overall record. Final overall record for men's gymnastics, they finished off with a 5-13 record, 2-match win streak, 1-4 at home, 0-5 away, 4-4 in neutral matches. Sticking to gymnastics, we will switch over, of course, to the women's side on that. So just got to get that loaded up here real quickly. Man, this one's going to definitely drag on here for me, and unfortunately drag on for y'all. But again, is what it is. What happens when you got to recap stuff from a 5-month period. Women's gymnastics, we pick up the action for them here. Scrolling through things to get to the recaps and all that. February the 20th in Berkeley is where we pick up the action for the women's gymnastics program with a 196.800 to 196.750 win over North Carolina. They would then go to the Sac State Tri-Meet on February the 27th, picking up a victory over Sacramento State, 196.875 to 194.900. And they would get a victory as well on the 27th of February against San Jose State with a 196.875 to 196. March the 7th in Berkeley against Boise State, the women would get another victory again, winning that contest by a final of 197.225 to 195.925. Cal Tri-Meet going down after that on March the 13th would see them take on San Jose State and Stanford. They would pick up a victory over San Jose State, 197.075 to 196.075, but then they would take a loss against Stanford, 197.075 to 197.625. Cal Quad going down after that. picking up things here. 3 matches on March the 15th. 197.175 to 196.575 win over Washington. A win over UC Davis as well with a 197.175 to 191.175. And a third victory that day as well against Pennsylvania with a 197.175 to 195.900. ACC Championship going down after that with 3 matches for Cal Women's Gymnastics on the 21st of March. First one being a 196.900 to 197.100 loss to Clemson, a loss of 196.900 to 197.075 against Stanford. They would pick up a win, though, against North Carolina State, 196.900 to 196.500. NCAA Regionals, April the 2nd against Florida, Penn State, and Arizona State. They would lose against Florida 198.125 to 196.675, defeat Penn State 198.675 to 196.200, and they would also defeat Arizona State 196.675 to 196.050. NCAA Regionals against Florida, Georgia, and Michigan State on April the 4th. They would lose all 3 of those, losing first to Florida 198.050 to 196.975, a 197.750 to 196.975 loss against Georgia, and a 197 to 196.975 loss to Michigan State to close out the season for them. Cal Women's Gymnastics 20-11 overall, 4-2 in conference play. 3-match losing streak, unfortunately, for them to close out the year. 7-1 at the Haas. They were 2-1 away for the Haas, and they were 11-9 in neutral site contests. So women definitely looking better on the gymnastics side than the men did this year. Let's see who outperformed who in the pool now between the men's and women's swimming and diving programs. We will, of course, take a look back first at what the men did from February the 17th on, and then, of course, after that, take a look at what the women did as well. God, I just want to make sure I'm sitting here doing this stuff on the phone, trying to make sure I got the correct thing pulled up in the schedule and all that. So bear with me here as I get that all up. All righty, here we go. For men's, let's see here, men's swimming and diving, February the 27th through the 28th, they were at the Spiker Aquatic Complex for the last chance meet. NCAA Zone E Diving Championships went down from March 9th through the 11th. Let's see here. Then they had the championship on March 25th through the 28th, and nothing listed on there, it looks like. For the ACC championship, it looks like they got first place, but that was on February the 15th. We already covered that in the last show. So, well, I guess they either didn't do anything or they just forgot to post stuff for the men's swimming and diving program. 3-3 overall finish for them. 1-2 at home, 2-1 away, and no neutral site contests for the men's swimming and diving program this spring. Well, that was relatively quick. Wow. Hey, like I said, sometimes it happens, man. It's like, come on, how could you forget to post any sort of recap link and all that for those programs? And before I forget, men's and women's swimming and diving is another one of those sports that is played not just in the spring, but in the fall as well. For the women's swimming and diving program, they partook in the ACC Championship from February the 17th through February the 21st, and they ended up placing in third place in that championship matchup. Just like the men, they also had the last chance meet at the Spiker Aquatic Complex from February the 27th through February the 28th, and also had the Zone E NCAA Diving Championship, March 9th through the 11th. For the NCAA Championship, that, of course, went down on March the 18th through the 21st, they ended up placing 4th overall in the NCAA Championship. So, hey, the women actually ended up doing something, so I'm guessing the men ended up just not advancing to that. Women's swimming and diving, overall, they were 3-2, 1-1 at home, 2-1 away, and no neutral site contests for them. So, hey, after a little bit of dragged-on segments here, it looks like we're starting to kind of push through things here a little bit, and we only got 2 more sports to look at here before we take our final break of the night on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid. Second to last sport we're going to look at here, of course, is the women's water polo program. And again, see, just like everybody else, what they've been up to from February the 17th through when their season came to an end. For the women's water polo program, let's see here. Another one of the sports, also, by the way, that plays in both the fall and the spring when they get their action going on. Never mind. Wow, give me a second here. I clicked on the men's water polo program team for some reason, so disregard that. The the men's water polo program team plays in the fall, and the women, I want to say, I believe they play in the spring, if I remember correctly. So I almost got things a little bit twisted up there, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. Got the correct things pulled up. Yeah, the men play in the fall. The women always usually play their matches in the spring. And for the women's water polo program, we pick up on the recap action on February the 21st in Berkeley, California, where they had a 19-18 overtime loss against UCLA. February the 28th, they would head out to Tempe and pick up an 11-10 victory over Arizona State. March the 7th, back in Berkeley, taking on San Jose State. They would pick up the victory in that one by the final score of 22-10. March the 15th, in Berkeley once again. W's flowing, by the way, here for a little while at the Spiker Aquatic Complex. Picking up a 10-9 victory in Berkeley on March 15th against Hawaii. A 19-7 victory against Indiana on March the 21st. They would continue the winning ways on the road, picking up an 11-5 or 11-6 victory, on March the 25th at Long Beach State, before finally getting handed a loss by USC in LA on March the 28th. They would lose that one by a final of 14-10. They would then get handed another loss on April the 4th against Stanford to close out the regular season at Stanford, losing by a final of 8-7. MPSF tournament would see them begin the tournament on April the 10th with a 14-12 victory over Arizona State. They would follow that up with a 17-14 loss on April the 11th against USC, and then conclude that with a 10-9 loss on April the 12th against UCLA. At the NCAA tournament, beginning on April the 24th, Cal would pick up a 15-10 victory over Hawaii, and a 13-11 victory on April the 25th against Stanford, before finally getting defeated by USC on April the 26th by a final score of 10-9. Women's water polo in 2026 finished off with a 16-8 record. They were 3-3 in conference play, 7-3 at home, 3-2 away, and 6-3 in neutral site contests in 2026. So a solid year right there for the women's water polo program. Definitely can build a lot on that. Didn't get a championship, though, obviously, and ended up having a lot of issues, it seemed like, consistently against Stanford and the like, and USC as well. But just, hey, build again on the positives and look to overcome those demons and those individual programs when you kick off things again in the spring of 2027. Before we finally take our last break of this edition of the show, let's go ahead and take a look at what went down for Cal Track and Field to close out things with their spring semester. We go all the way back to, as we're going through things here, February the 21st in Berkeley, California. They had the Cal All-Comers meet, which I guess obviously is a Cal-related stuff, so they don't have anything up for that. ACC Indoors Championship going down on February the 26th and the 27th and the 28th as well. They would end up finishing off as follows in the tournament. The men placing 10th, the women tying for 12th in the tournament. In the NCAA Indoor Championship, the women would end up tying for 37th. You had the California Outdoor Open at Berkeley on March 20th and the 21st. The Bob Larson Distance Carnival on March 27th down at UCLA. That also went down on the 28th. The Buttress Hamilton Invitational on April the 2nd, April the 3rd and 4th. You had the Mike Farrell Classic on April the 3rd. Stanford Invitational on April the 3rd. The Big Meet on April the 11th. EMSAC Relays on April the 15th and 16th, 17th and 18th. Brian Clay Invitational on the 17th and 18th. Peyton Jordan Invitational May the 1st. God, they don't even have the recaps up here, unfortunately. The ACC Outdoor Championship May the 14th through the 16th. The men finished 11th, and the women finished tied for 14th. The NCAA West Regional Championships, let's see here. Doesn't look like they partook in that. And doesn't look like there's anything for the NCAA Outdoor Championships either that went down from June the 10th through June the 11th. Cal Track and Field wrapping up things on both the men's and the women's side for 2026. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this Cal Athletics Talk. We still got one more segment to go, however, before we draw this edition of the show to a close. So when we come back at you all, of course, from our final break of the broadcast, we will go ahead and be taking a look at what was going down with Cal men's and women's tennis, Cal men's and women's golf, Cal men's and women's rowing, and, of course, get on out of here with my final thought of the night. Final break of the night, final segment of the night, coming y'all's way here in a bit on show number 57 of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Final break of the night, wrapping up there. Final segment of the night, getting ready to come y'all's way here on this 57th edition of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Hey, had to make sure I got a Kavansky song in there somehow, given the fact that unfortunately he passed away at the age of 50 back here on the 28th of July. And, of course, started off as the 28th, getting my days mixed up here. Yeah, it was 28th of July. Started off for me recording on the 29th of July, and of course it is now into the wee early hours of the morning, almost 12:45 here on the 29th, as I get ready to wrap up things here on show number 57 of the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. 30th and current sitting governor of Tightwad, Keith Salmon, and coming at you for the entire duration of this broadcast. I, of course, was joined via recording technology by 29th and emeritus governor of Tightwad, Tad Dillinger III, and potential future governor of Tightwad, hopeful Donnie Knucklehead Hudson, joining me as well with that recorded audio that we had earlier. On that note, let's get underway here in the final segment of tonight's show with the last six Cal athletic programs that we need to recap action for from February the 17th through June the 11th. Going into things here, we begin with the tennis programs here in this final segment of this edition of the show, beginning, of course, first with the men's tennis program. February the 27th is where we pick up things with them as they were in North Carolina taking on Duke, losing that day by a final of 4-2. March the 1st would see them pick up a 4-2 win on the road at North Carolina. March the 6th, they would come back to Berkeley and lose 4-1 to Virginia. They would pick up a 4-0 victory over Virginia Tech in Berkeley on March the 8th. March the 13th, 7-0 victory in Berkeley against Boston College. March 13th, a 6-1 victory against St. Mary's in Berkeley as well. March the 15th would finally see them take a loss in Berkeley against SMU by a final of 3-4. Headed out to Kentucky after that on March the 20th, picking up a 4-0 victory against Louisville. Then to South Bend after that on March 22nd, where they suffered a 4-0 loss against Notre Dame. March the 28th, they would stay on the road and take a 4-3 loss against Clemson, continuing on the road on March the 28th and picking up a 4-1 win against Georgia Tech before finally coming back to Berkeley on April the 3rd, where they would pick up a 4-1 win against North Carolina. They would fall by a final of 4-2 against Wake Forest on April the 5th. April the 12th, they would fall 4-2 in Berkeley against Stanford. ACC championship for men's tennis getting underway on April the 15th. They would begin with a 4-0 victory over Georgia Tech, a 5-0 victory against SMU on April the 16th, before suffering a 4-3 loss on April the 17th against Virginia. At the NCAA championship, they picked up a 4-3 victory over Kentucky on May the 1st, before suffering a 4-0 loss against Ohio State on May the 2nd. Men's tennis program in the spring of 2026 went 17-14. They had a 6-7 conference record, 8-8 in Berkeley, 5-4 away from Berkeley, and 4-2 in neutral site contest. Staying on the tennis court here, obviously, as the action continues down the road here in this final segment of this edition of the show. Moving from men's tennis, of course, over to women's tennis. Let's go ahead now and see how the women fared from February the 27th onward. Just, again, scrolling through everything, the pull-up stuff in regards to that. Let's see here. Where is everything? February the 20th is where we pick up the action for the women's tennis program. They picked up a 4-1 victory that day in Berkeley on February the 20th against Clemson. 4-0 victory on February the 21st in Berkeley against Georgia Tech. A 4-1 loss on February the 27th in Berkeley against North Carolina State. They would pick up a victory in Berkeley on February the 28th against Wake Forest by a final of 4-1. They would lose to Pepperdine 4-2 on March the 8th in Berkeley. Santa Barbara is where they would be on March the 14th, and they would pick up a 4-3 victory against UC Santa Barbara, a 4-1 loss at Pepperdine on March the 15th, a 4-0 victory at Boston College on March the 20th, a 4-1 victory at Syracuse on March 22nd, 4-1 victory at Louisville on March 27th, a 4-1 loss at Notre Dame on March 29th. April the 3rd, they would fall 4-1 against Virginia in Berkeley. April the 5th, 4-3 victory in Berkeley against Virginia Tech. April the 7th, they would lose 4-0 against Stanford in Berkeley. April the 10th, 4-2 victory out in Dallas, Texas against SMU. In the ACC Women's Tennis Championship on April the 16th, they picked up a 4-2 victory against Florida State before falling in the quarterfinal round against North Carolina State on the 17th by a final of 4-0. In the NCAA Championship, they picked up a 4-1 victory against Utah in the first round on May the 1st before getting bounced in the second round by USC on May the 2nd by a final score of 4-1. Women's tennis in 2025/2026. I forgot that I think both programs actually play in the fall and the spring. I could be wrong on that, but the women definitely play in the fall and the spring. Overall, they were 13-8, 8-4 in conference play, 8-4 at home, 5-2 away, and 2-2 in neutral site matches in 2026. Moving on now from the tennis courts to the golf links, let's go ahead and see how the men's and women's tennis programs fared from February the 14th through the end of their season. We'll start off, of course, first with the men's golf program, and men and the women also, again, one of the few programs that actually play matches, games, whatever you want to consider them, in the spring and the fall as well. For the women, started with the men's tennis program, they played in the Cabo Collegiate on March the 1st through the 3rd. They don't have anything up for that. March the 9th through the 10th, they were at the Desmond Invitational, and they got nothing down for that. The good win against Stanford on the 26th through the 28th of March, they got nothing there for that. Western Intercollegiate, April 13th through the 15th against Washington Intercollegiate. Nothing there for that. ACC Championship on the 23rd through the 26th, and the regionals May 18th through the 20th. Man, just wish that they could just put that stuff on there, man. Here we go again. Sports that they don't have anything up for. Well, I mean, they do. They got the recaps on there, but just, damn. Let's just have something right there on the front page to look at. All right, let's see if we fare better with anything on the women's golf side of things. They play in the fall as well and go into the spring as well, just like the men do. For them, let's see here, March the 9th through the 10th, they were at the Julie Inkster Invitational. Nothing listed here for that. March the 30th through the 31st. Silicon Valley Showcase, and it's pretty much looking like that the rest of the way out. So, yeah, men's and women's golf, they have recap links, but they don't have a quick little thing to show on there for that. So, so much for those two. All right, last two sports programs we're going to take a look at here on this edition of the show are going to be the men's and women's rowing programs. Let's go ahead and start off here with the men first. Get the schedule pulled out. Let's see here. The men, let's see here. February the 28th, we're at the the California Cup Challenge. They don't have anything up here for that. Redwood Shore Invitational on March the 7th and the 8th. Don't have anything for that. March 14th, the T. Gary Rogers Rowing Center. Don't have anything for that. It's Alumni Day. March the 28th against the San Diego Crew Classic. Wow. So they don't even have that stuff on here too. Man, y'all are driving me up the wall here with this. So much for that one as well. And why do I got a feeling it's going to unfortunately be the same for the women's rowing as well? I don't get why they just can't post a quick little thing here, Yep. Unfortunately, same thing for them. They don't got any of that stuff written down for what the women did as well. So, well, there you go. That's it. That is all the Cal Athletics recap talk right there for the spring semester, covering everything for all the programs from February the 17th through June the 11th. Then I got to do this all again over a little over probably 30-plus hours. So, man, I got to remember myself. There's a couple programs at the end where they really don't got anything down, so I can actually maybe save myself a little hassle and no need to waste any energy on that. Man. What kind of a little bit of a bummer to end things here in this final segment of the show. As always, for the latest information pertaining to the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill, be sure to check things out at afanradio.com/the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Follow us on Facebook, our original social media home, facebook.com/Tightwad Hill Official. Use Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call the app that muskrats damn near driven into the ground. If you still got the balls and you're still over there and you have, or have no, getting tongue twisted here on the damn info for the stuff. If you're still on Twitter, we're over there still as well. Feel free to follow us at Tightwad Hill 23. Past editions of the show and more you can, of course, always catch on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/AsFanRadio. And that's where you can, of course, catch us for the next show broadcast, the second of two shows on back-to-back days. Even though I obviously recorded this one right here on the 29th, it's airing on the 30th. Not show number. We don't do a show number again until frickin' the fall. The Bear Raid's 2026 Cal Athletics Spring Semester in Review show going down on July the 31st, airing over on youtube.com/AsFanRadio. Hopefully, approximately, we'll have that up at about 8 p.m. All hinges on, of course, how long it takes me to get everything press down record and get the final version of the show up on the YouTube channel. So definitely be sure to check things out for the Spring Semester in Review show on July the 31st. On that note, finally, we get to my final thoughts of the broadcast. Real quickly, again, still a little ways to go before we get to it, but we already are having the field starting to shape up for the 2028 election for the next governor of Tightwad Hill, where it will be a new face because I will not be running again in 2028. Your choices as of now, unless anybody else joins the field between now and then, are Jenny Ortega, Burt Brown, and Donnie Knucklehead Hudson. Jenny, of course, striving to be potentially the first ever governess of Tightwad Hill. Burt looking to possibly finally get a W after losing to me in the previous 3 elections, while Donnie is saddling up and trying to strive to become the oldest governor ever in the history of the tradition that is Tightwad Hill. As always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sitting through this over 2+ hour edition of the show, as, of course, we had a lot to go through and recap outside of the last 4 sports that we were looking at here on this show since, again, we hadn't done anything in over 5+ months. Apologies for that again. Hey, life gets in the way. Everything happens to us. Just looking forward to getting the fact to do 2 more shows. This one and, of course, the Spring Semester in Review show to close out the spring portion of things for the Bear Raid. And obviously, we'll be dropping the full tentative fall semester broadcast schedule for our fall shows at the tail end of the Spring Semester in Review show on the 31st. On that note, and as always, thank you for tuning in, fellow Tightwads, fellow California Golden Bears fans. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. The views and opinions of our cast, our guests, and our listeners are in no way, shape, or form affiliated with Cal Athletics, the University of California, Berkeley, or the ACC, or the NCAA. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Apologies again for a 5+ unplanned break. Again, it happens. Enjoy this. Definitely happy if y'all enjoyed this. If not, then no, well, that's on y'all. Be right back at you again for the Spring Semester in Review show on July the 31st. Until then, take care, stay blue, stay gold, and as always, roll on you Bears! Whew, time to get some rest, and I'll see you all in about 30+ hours for the Spring Semester in Review show on July the 31st.